sit down there. Hello, everybody. Welcome to tonight's talk in the Mansfield series, and we have the superstar of sculpture in our presence, Antony Gormley. And as we all know, standing there in the middle of our quad here at Mansfield is one of his great sculptures, and we're so lucky because he gave it to us on loan. When I first arrived at Mansfield, I said, Antony, who's a friend, I phoned up and I said, we have no art worth talking about. And I said, and I want my students to be exposed to great art too. And I just wondered if you something that you needed to kind of park somewhere for a wee while. And so Antony said to me, well, where would you put it? And I said, in the middle of the quad. And he said, oh, what is the quad like? And so I sent him a picture of our quad, and he went, some quad was the text message I got back. And then he said, I'll look in the cupboard. Well, that was in the cupboard, and it found its way to Mansfield, and it was actually, for me, it spoke to my hopes and aspirations for what could happen at Mansfield. And so for me, that business of the arms outstretched meant that was what we were going to do. And I just want to say thank you to you, Antony, for making all of that possible and for starting us on that journey of change here at Mansfield. You really did, and you made hope possible. So I want to tonight say that it's quite hard capturing this man because he travels the world, because he's now a sort of global iconic figure. And I could never get hold of him to find out what title he wanted on his talk. So I said, I gave it a sort of generic title. But in fact, tonight he's going to talk about making space. Let me tell you a little bit about Antony. You all know that he's a sculptor, but I mean, he's had more awards than most of us have had hot dinners. He was awarded the Turner Prize in 1994, the South Bank Prize for Visual Art in 1999, the Bernard Helliger Award for Sculpture in 2007, the OBE Prize in 2012, the Premium Imperial in 2013. In 1997, he was made an OBE, and then he was made a Knight in the New Year's Honours List in 2014. He's an honorary fellow of the Royal Institute of British Architects, and he's in the architectural field. He's also a great ideas man. An honorary doctor of the University of Cambridge because he was an anthropologist, and a fellow of Trinity and Jesus Colleges, Cambridge. Gormley has been a Royal Academician since 2003, and he is, as I've said, I think probably one of the world's great artists of our time. Antony, we welcome you here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Helena, thank you so much for that warm introduction. It's a real pleasure to be here today. 6 years ago when I arrived, the college was a very different place, and certainly this space didn't exist. And the transformation, I think, is material, but I think it's also about the spirit of what Mansfield is. And there's something brilliant about this building, isn't there? That it expresses real confidence and hope about human futures, but it does it through light and openness. I haven't been back to the college really since we put the sculpture in. And that feeling of these disparate buildings now having been brought together, there's a care about the common spaces here. And well, it's just absolutely lovely to come back today. And I saw the sculpture's got a fresh oiling, so it's looking sort of really bright and perky. And the mound has been resettled. Apparently the crows had a go at it, and the foundation was a bit exposed. But I thought today the best way would be to try to put this work in context and talk more generally, maybe, about what I see has changed in really the art of our time, in contrast perhaps to the work, certainly of 100 years ago, but even more recently. And I think in talking about making space, I think this isn't, again, simply about physical space. This is about making space internally to the minds and imaginations of the public. In my view, art never wanted to be privatized. Art is, of its nature, a gift. Its practice and production, in a sense, only begins to have meaning when it is shared. And I would say, in the broad history of the need that human beings have had to make things, that the desire to make things is a desire very similar to the conversations that we have daily, which is a way in which we try to make sense of an experience that we've had. We then make a story out of it. We offer that to another person in the hope that this object, that in those terms is simply a verbal exchange or a story, is a widening of another person's experience of the world. And I think that's a common, I mean, I believe with Joseph Beuys that in some senses each of us is creative, and each of us is in some senses making a work, and that work is our lives, making sense, making meaning, making value. And my view is that art is simply one of the ways in which that can not only be evidenced but also catalyzed. In other words, that art is more a process than a thing. Now, this is a photograph of an object that stands out there. It's still, and it's silent, and it's got no label. That's really, really important to me, that what it represents is what each and every one of you allows it to represent. And to that degree, I think that this is, in a way, a small example of something much broader that has happened really since the beginning of the 20th century, which is what Duchamp asked for. He said the viewer does half of the work. And then Ernst Gombrich, an extraordinary art historian with a very broad idea about art history. I studied art history after studying anthropology and archaeology, and he begins that wonderful book, The Story of Art, with that one sentence: there is no real history of art, there is only the history of artists. But he also came up with this wonderful phrase, the beholders share. And I think that what really has happened in the 20th century was the liberation of art from its duty to serve power, from the power of the patron to allow art in some senses to underwrite and reinforce the status quo, and in some way make us assured that the known structures of the world around us were in some senses morally and politically right. Well, I think all of that has changed, and the history of art, really, from Braque and Picasso's first experiments with Cubism, was, in a sense, the democratization of art. This came out of Impressionism and the idea that you didn't have to simply make statues of mythological beings or kings and queens or generals on horseback, but actually the way that light hits the surface of a lake or the sea, or the way that trees in first leaf seem to carry a kind of feeling about vitality, that these were things that were common experience that art could deal with without, as it were, referring to the hierarchies of a social world and social order. Anyway, really, I don't want to talk for very long because it's very rare that I talk to a brainy audience of this significance, and it would be more fun, really, for me to try and listen to your questions and maybe respond to them. But what I thought I would try and do is just put this in relation to maybe other works that I've made before and since. And I'm wondering whether we should shut the curtains a bit so that we get a bit more light on the. It's only so that the slides are a bit more visible, and then maybe we could turn the lights down a bit more. Isn't this a wonderful auditorium, by the way? It's really.
Learning how to work it.
I was still. How many musical events have you had in here?
Not yet.
Not yet.
No,
Well, it feels like it's ready for the stringed instruments. Is that as far as it will go?
our musical director will be listening with
Ah.
alert ears at the back of this hall.
Fantastic. So could you only afford half a curtain? No, it's not. It's not.
Working on it.
No, if that's the best we can do, don't break anything. That will be fine. Is that a bit better? That's a bit better. Okay. So this is in a way where this whole thing. I said to Helena when I said, of course she can have something for here, that this was my attempt to sort of investigate the mind-body problem. I've always thought that was an extraordinary thing, that a body in a way is an object in space, but at the same time it contains consciousness which has this ability of infinite extension. In other words, we have a faculty within us that is infinitely, the Tibetans call it the sky nature of mind, this potential to somehow expand beyond the limitations of the bounding skin of a body. And this I made for a prison in South Carolina, in Charleston, with its own history of slavery and colonialism in a way, with this double bind idea of trying to find a new place for the body in art. Because I didn't want to, in a way I wanted to do two things. I wanted to start again with a ground that would simply be common. We all have a body, but do it not from the point of view of idealization or representation, or in a way trying to make the perfect copy, trying to make, in a way, a reproduction of a real body. So these are just 5 lead cases made around my body. I started using my own body not because it's anything special, but because it's the only bit of the material world that I happen to inhabit. So I can use, in a sense, feeling rather than measurement or visual acuity as the basis for a work. But what am I trying to do? I'm trying to say, is there a way of literally reintroducing the body as, in a sense, an idea into a space? And so, yeah, this is called learning to think, and there's 2 attitudes to it in a sense. We took all of the windows out. This is the first floor of a 2-story prison built in 1840, and yeah, the idea is that these bodies, in a sense, have escaped into another realm, a realm of, you could say, imagination. They're kind of, they're what they can see and think is part of a space that is beyond, as it were, the material. But of course, this is a space. Well, I say of course, but through the justice system of a slavery-bound 18th century, many formerly African slaves were lynched. You could say that there's an uneven balance here between recognition of history and an attempt to also release the building and that memory from that history. I guess both of these works are trying to do the same thing, which is say, maybe it's more important how you introduce this body into a context than the body itself. Because actually what you're trying to do is engage the body of the viewer in a kind of investigation. And this is another way in which I've tried to, by implication, not by cutting holes and putting the pieces against the ceiling, but by implication, engaging the space as part of the work. And this is called Drawn. And I wanted to destabilize, in a sense, if we think about the history of statues in particular, their whole thing was the reinforcement of an order, a civic order, a civilized order. And I'm trying to, in a way, disorientate the viewer and, in a way, relieve the viewer from the certainties of which way is up, for example. And so this is a work made in the time of mechanical reproduction. These are industrially produced, basically solid castings. They're about 3/4 of a ton each. There are 8 of them, and they exist in the 8 corners of a room. And what excites me is that in the end, the viewer or the public, anybody that comes in through those doors, in a sense takes the position, the central position that maybe a traditional statue might take, and becomes the ground on which this destabilization of the space begins to act. And I guess for me, the other side of this work is thinking about what is space, and the idea that both architecture and sculpture, in a sense, were used as instruments to reinforce a stability of order. And yet we know that there is no stability, there is no stasis. You know, we're moving around our own axis at about 140,000 kilometers an hour. We're spinning around the sun. Our little solar system is spinning around our galaxy. Space itself, the dimension of space, is expanding. So this whole idea of stability is, I think, something that needs to be, particularly in the time of Hubble and our knowledge of the redshift and, in a sense, the Hubble replacement of the cosmological constant. I hope I'm not making this too intellectual, because in a sense what I want is for the viewer to become the ground on which attitudes to space can be, in a way, haptic. In other words, felt as much as thought. So I just wanted to show another work that how do I get this to play? Because this is a, and I just press this. Oh, no, that's not right. I might need that. So it's, did you know that one of these was, sorry, I'm talking now to whoever my technical assistant is. Hello.
They're coming up as pictures on the slides.
But this is a video. Would you think that'll, can we, oh, there we are. Great. Oh, good, yeah. Can we turn that back into a full screen? Great, I needed help. Thank you so much.
That's okay, I'll be right here.
this, in a way, is another work altogether. This is Horizon Field. This is a large monochrome. I've always enjoyed the work of Ad Reinhardt, for example. So this is a large painting. It's 6.5 tons of black paint, to be precise, on a surface that is 50 meters long and 25 meters wide. This is literally a ground on which the viewer becomes the subject. And I think that's the other, in a way, proposition of this talk in terms of making space. Is it possible that actually, rather than favouring the object, that art can literally be a space in which the viewer's present time experience of, as it were, being is the subject, and this is simply an instrument. So here it is. It's 25 meters wide, 50 meters long, suspended by 8 very thin wires, and it moves. Maybe you caught that in the film. That actually, I mean, I think of this as a living democratic model. Your movement affects the movement of everyone, and everyone's movement affects you. I managed to get, you can see that some people resisted, but this is Hamburg, and I asked everybody to take their shoes off at least. Some of them were reluctant to take their socks off, but the idea is you come in, you get rid of your phone and all your accoutrements, you then come up this staircase on the left, go out over this bridge and step onto this platform. And underneath the platform there are acoustic holes. You can't see this so well in this photo. Perhaps in this you can. But can you see those round holes? They're a bit like the holes in a guitar that as it were, transmit the acoustics. So you're very, very aware of, as it were, transferred human movement above that is coming through sound, but then it also comes through movement. This will move up to almost 2 meters. And, I mean, that's extreme when people start experimenting with walking together and stopping. But it was just extraordinary how quickly behaviours evolved on this. And it was as if somehow this was an occasion in which people could enjoy each other, literally the viewers becoming the viewed for other viewers, on a space that was completely known. So this is the Dijktorhallen, very well-known museum. They had offered me a retrospective originally, but I just said there must be a better way of using the potential of this building. So this gives you an idea of how this evolved. And what I like about this photo is you can see the whole range of behaviour. So, you know, girls running, some people, you know, trying to stand on one foot while the whole thing is shifting. This couple here, a man pointing out to his girlfriend maybe where they live or where they work, because I had all of the windows taken out. They were previously obscured to allow this to be a raised platform from which people look out at the world around this museum and relocate themselves within it. So you could say this is a kind of turning of the museum inside out into a kind of place of collective experience and a sort of looking back at the world as if it was a picture of itself, in exactly the same way that somebody might do that looking at a Claude Lorraine and saying, you know, aren't those blue hills beautiful? Here is actually somebody reconnecting with their own living space through, as it were, the instrument of this work. So some of you may know this work, which has now been recited in Crosby outside Liverpool. That the idea of this was, again, to, I suppose, reposition these. What are they, really? They are industrial fossils of a lived moment of a human body that is particular and, in a way, individual, but they, by being multiplied, in a sense, become abstract. But then they also become almost like black holes in human form that look out to space at large, have this relationship with the horizon. And so this is now what it's like at Crosby, except 5 of them apparently have gone squiffy, and one has actually been cut off its base and is lying in the sand. I only learnt that this afternoon. It was slightly worrying, but the idea of this really is to offer, you could say, the works of human manufacture, or you could say culture, to nature, in order to recalibrate that relationship between the unformed and the formed. You could say the sea for us is a metaphor. The sea is a metaphor, in a way, for everything that we cannot control, everything that cannot be, as it were, ordered and structured. And somehow this is a field now, and the bodies are less important than the, as representations, idealizations, all of those things, than simply an offering of an occasion for you to join them and also look out. This is a. If that was about, in a sense, making a work that positioned these things in a liminal space between, the land and the sea, or the controlled and the uncontrolled. Anyway, the positioning of things that you might, in our culture, have expected to find protected in the cultural realm of a gallery or a museum, into nature. This is Blind Light, which is a box which is basically filled with a cloud. How many of you saw this? Good, a few. This was at the Hayward in 2007. So this was simply a box, 11 meters by 11 meters, 3.5 meters high, filled with about 2,500 lumens of light, and a cloud at about 1.5 atmospheres of pressure, with the doorway always open. And this was another way, like Horizon Field Hamburg, of allowing, in a sense, the subject of the art to be in the experience of the viewer. And another way in which the viewers became the viewed for other people outside, and this idea that you in a sense become an image for those outside as you approach the edge. There was something that I'm still trying to work out the implications of this work, that is really just to do with the limitations of the visual. How can we allow, as it were, the art to be less about representation and objecthood than about a process of self-realization. And again, this was a completely open experience. Now this is, again, something that I'd quite like to play you. So this is just a short film taken until the camera got completely misted and you couldn't see. Have we got some sound on this or not? It doesn't matter if we...
I can put sound on.
Can you? Yeah, let's have the sound, because it's quite funny, the sound.
I'll just have to exit out a second.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Well, it's quite silent, isn't it? But never mind. The minute you stepped over this always open threshold, you were unaware. You couldn't see your feet. If you held your hand out in front of you, you couldn't see your hand. But if you were within 25 millimeters, centimeters of somebody, they would suddenly appear. There's a bit of sound there, isn't there? But the strange thing here was the way that you went into a space that was about all of the things that visuality are, light and appearance, but appearance was the thing that was, in a way, most fugitive. And it was just lovely how people laughed and responded, and in a sense all of those things that are common to us and are so ordinary suddenly became strange and exciting and exchanged.
Very frightening, but good. Not knowing where you're going, where the walls are. Nah, not knowing where you're going. It's a bit. You lose yourself on purpose, innit?
Yeah, I like that. Lose yourself on purpose in it. Yeah. But the implications of this work are still with me, and just that idea that I think I was trying to get at with Drawn, of taking a bit of the real world and somehow managed to making it strange enough for people to reinsert themselves within the moment of being, and somehow find some joy in that. This is the last thing I'm going to show you in terms of the implications of that. So if up to now what I've been showing you is these two things, one trajectory in the work is to make these spaces that make people into in some senses the subject of the work, that don't as it were refer to the body, and then those works that try to in some way register the body but as a space itself. And this work is trying to link those two trajectories together, and it's called Model, and this is the model of Model. So this is a model of a building in human form that is about 36 meters long, so about 100 feet long, and as you can see, you can get in through the right foot. That is the right foot there. And this is what it was like in the gallery. So it's made of steel. There are 3 openings. And here, in absolute contrast to blind light, I'm trying to make an object that gives onto a space that in this case is really about darkness, and darkness as a kind of form, or darkness as an invitation to a form of dreaming and being. This is as you come into the ankle from your entrance into the foot, and you have to sort of suddenly modify your behavior. And I'm interested in that as well. How can sculpture begin to, in a way, encourage new forms of behavior and new forms of association, like, obviously, Horizon Field, Hamburg. But in this case, allowing people's acoustic sense being like a bat and sensing how these sometimes very limited light spaces, how you're going to move through them, and allowing for an internal architecture that has nothing to do with function, but everything to do with somehow extending your capability as a perceiving body beyond the visual, as a sort of bat, moving through light and dark. I think that's it. how do I turn this off? The yeah, I just wanted to end really with where this is going. I think where it's going is that, in a way, you are intrinsic to what art has become, which is an open space of possibility, in which, quite in contrast to its history, this is not about making pictures of the known, but about giving you, in a sense, an opportunity to experience unknown things. And part of that is art's potential to, I think, allow an arising within us of thoughts and feelings that wouldn't otherwise be possible. So the value of art is not something that is determined by commercial value or by pre-existing narratives, but by what you make it into. And that I think of that in a sense the freedoms that artists took to themselves in those extraordinary, in a way, early moments of the 20th century is now offered back to the viewer. And that in some way I think art is coming into a new phase where it's released itself in a sense from the recondite history of modernism, where in some senses if you didn't know about Impressionism, Cubism, Fauvism, Orphism, Expressionism, Abstract Expressionism, Minimalism, Conceptualism, you wouldn't be able to engage with the work. I think that there is a sense, and it wasn't my generation, I think it was the generation that followed, the work of Damien Hirst and Tracy and Sarah Lucas, that in some senses wanted art to re-engage with life, and that it wasn't actually about the history, about continuing the history of style, but about trying to find a new purpose for what art can do, which might help, in a sense, the process that all of us are involved in terms of self-determination and the making of a self. Anyway, thank you very much.
Well, I hope you're all thinking like mad and your brains are aching, getting your heads round Antony's message to us. It's that business that you, as the maker of art and the receiver of art, are involved in a joint enterprise. That you need the viewer and the engagement of the viewer from art to take the meaning of the art to another place, and the revelation that comes in that. I always remember that when your sculpture arrived and was placed in the centre of the quad, many of our young were confused by it, and indeed many of our old were confused by it and still were confused by it. But the whole purpose, I think, of your work and the work of the people that I find most exciting is the idea that you are trying to think about what it's saying to you and what you're saying and thinking in response to it, that it's reaching places in you that you, as you've just said, perhaps had not connected with, and thoughts that you might not have thought, connected with in a real way. And you express it, of course, in a different way. But for me, it's about liberating the imagination.
Yeah.
And I love that business of, I think it was Boyce, I can't remember, you'll remember better than me, that we are in the process of living our lives, in fact, involved in an act of creation too. and the choices we make in doing that, of course, are. And art is, for me, so important in making those discoveries about how best to make one's life. But there are people out there who want to ask you questions about your art. And
But
there's
it
a
is
hand
important. I think with this, I don't know. I would like to think there is no one interpretation
Never,
of
never.
this, and that that's the biggest challenge. In a sense, it's easy to make monumental statements at scale. I think the difficulty is to make something that literally can be lived with over a long time without it becoming, I'm not saying that I've succeeded with this work, without it becoming in some senses invisible. That's certainly what's happened. If we think about our totem works, down Whitehall, I'm not sure how many. I mean, I think probably Charles I gets looked at most, because actually maybe that's the best sculpture. We've just got our first Millicent Fawcett, first female statue in Parliament Square. But it's very interesting how the statue itself, it means something maybe very particular, and there's a particular political narrative applied to it at the time that it's put in, but then it fades. And I think the challenge that I have now in trying to, I want to make works that don't naturally just simply fit within a museum context, but can be on the street, on a beach, on a mountain, and engage people. I think it's very, very important that in a sense it remains an enigma. I made it because I was trying to reconcile, in a sense, well, as I started the mind-body dialectic, and I think it has sort of some connections with my upbringing, and you could say there are lots of associations here with crucifixions and sort of, in a way, Christian iconography, but at the same time there's a very strong desire to escape from that and find something else. And I'm aware that the work plays on this cusp. On the one hand, there it is on a raised kind of, it isn't a square stone plinth, it's now a hill that somebody can go and sit on, that is part of the lawn. But nevertheless, it is, as Helena asked, it is in the middle of the lawn. But at the same time, I want it to escape from the all of those, in a way, previous definitions of a statue. And a statue is usually, on the whole, Millicent Fawcett is hopefully the beginning of a much bigger wedge that will allow more work by female artists in collective space. But all of those works have a very, very clear representational job. You need to know the name, their history, and where they fit into a known history for them to have value, I think. And this is trying to do a very different job, and it's called present time. And to that degree, it also is suggesting that it's the present time of the engagement of a viewer looking at it that makes it, that somehow allows it to be, and it isn't just its occupation of the centre of this now very lively and wonderful.
Surrounded by croquet players,
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
great.
yeah.
Which really, Anthony was really thrilled that it was in there with all this stuff going on around it, which is great. You had your hand up, Dana, yeah?
First of all, thank you. I wanted to say that I did my PhD here. It was incredibly inspiring, and I felt very lucky to be able to come and look at this every morning. So thank you. I wanted to ask whether you thought that artists have specific roles in times of political turmoil, such as the time we're living in now, present times.
I think an artist's principal responsibility is to make the work that they have to make. I think it's an extraordinary thing when somebody like Ai Weiwei can use the position of an artist to deal with very real political and social issues. But it's interesting the problem that Ai Weiwei has had in transferring, the greatest work that he made, I think, is the Sichuan earthquake work, which he made first at the Haus der Kunst in Munich about 10 years ago, where he took the children's satchels and basically made this phrase that was from one of the mothers of a dead school girl, or a girl who'd been killed in the earthquake, and it translates something like, "She was happy as she walked as she lived her short life on this earth." A very touching thing about, in a sense, everything to do with what is wrong with a irresponsible government. But then in translating those concerns then to the migrant issue, I think it hasn't, or that need to, in some senses, engage with real social issues, it isn't, in my view, so successful. The problem about dealing with, I think, doesn't matter whether it's social injustice or political crises, is that I think art, to do what it can do, to be as open a ground as it needs to be in order to engage us, I think it can't be agitprop. And I would think that there are consistent issues that I've tried to deal with in my work, whether it's field, the terracotta, the masses of small hand-sized terracotta that fill cultural spaces, which I think of as dealing broadly with issues of population or overpopulation and climate change. These are not, I'm trying to find a physical way of asking myself, and then by implication the viewer, what our position is in relation to those issues, but without, in a way, identifying a cause. And I mean, sorry, this is a long answer to an important question. I think that you cannot. I'm equally very aware of the strangeness of our time, and certainly in Wei's latest film, Human Flow, that statistic that now 65 million, the equivalent of the inhabitants of this small island, are basically homeless and on the move, and that figure is going to increase by 40% this year. That was. I mean, this is the fact of our existence now, and I think that, by implication, is part of the context with which my work engages. So you could say that another place, which is 100 of these abstract bodies looking west, replicates a fundamental truth about in a way, the human project, which is that we have all been migrants, and the movement out of Africa, and particularly west, that ended really at the Pacific. That's part of our nature, and I guess that another place was me making a work for Cuxhaven, which was a leaving point for fleeing Jews at the end of the Weimar Republic and the rise of National Socialism. And I was trying to find a way of reconciling that memory with in a sense, I think, the false promise of the idea that somehow the human race can transmigrate and occupy another planet. I think that's a myth. I think it's a very dangerous myth. I think that our future is integrally connected to the planet. This is our extended body, and yeah, I think that is part of that work, to try to make a place of feeling that is materialized, that is in real space and real time, isn't about raising a flag or inviting people to the barricades, but tries to frame a question while also opening it. Sorry, that was a very long answer to an important question. Yes.
There's a hand at the very back, and I'd like to bring one of my young in before I come down to the front. The very back row. Yep, that's right.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you, Antony, for that lovely talk. A lot of the things you said reminded me a little bit of Fontana and spatialism, and a little bit of Pistoletto as well. The things about how the viewer's participation in the event of the artwork is kind of constitutive of the artwork. Do you think that these artists are, well, first of all, are you interested in them? And second, do you think they're relevant now?
I think they're both. It's interesting because I'm discussing a joint show with Fontana that would happen in either Turin or Milan, and Fontana is I think he's an extraordinarily revolutionary artist insofar as he sort of breaks that idea of, in a way, the surface of a canvas being, in a way, the sacred ground that somehow, the history of abstraction, and certainly Barnett Newman, suggests that surface in some senses is now even more sacred because it's the relationship between the surface and the viewer rather than the surface being a window onto another world. It was the idea of the painting as a membrane against which the existence of the viewer was sort of registered. And Fontana, you could say in this very paradoxical act of slicing into that surface, then reveals a material darkness. And I think that idea of, it's been in art for a very long time. So, Mantegna's Dead Christ, or Caravaggio's, Doubting Thomas. The idea of, in a sense, what exists beyond the material, what exists beyond flesh, sort of comes back into the history of modern art, but with Fontana, with this sort of material spiritual paradox. And I think, anyway, he's a great artist. And I think Michelangelo Pistoletto, it was interesting because Pistoletto we were given the Premium Imperiale in the same year, and it was very nice to spend some time with him. And I think he recognizes absolutely, in relation to your question, the responsibility, in a way, of an artist to actually, in terms of human contact, providing a space questioning and dialogue, and that's certainly what he does with his foundation. And it's interesting because with his mirror paintings and with the Concetto Spaziale of Fontana, they're both doing the same thing. They're saying, let us problematize and open in a way the limitations of a framed canvas, yeah, or object of art. Yeah, they're very important, both of them.
Thank you.
There's a hand over there, and then I'm going to come down to the front to my two.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all who helped organizing the event. My question has to do with your piece in Lelystad, the Netherlands, Exposure. What inspired you to create that, and whether a thing as too much exposure exists?
It's hard to hear you.
Oh, very sorry. Do you want me to repeat everything?
Yeah,
I
sure.
You got it? You got it?
I got it.
Yeah.
The question is, why did I make this large pylon in human form that stands on the coast of Holland, outside Lelystad, which is a city that occupies recovered land from the IJsselmeer, the sandy seabed to the west of Amsterdam. I think of that as it's another way of introducing maybe size or the notion of dimension itself into art. I think that's one of the, I think it's very important that the piece out there is life size, and that the piece at the bottom in a sense is about constraint or about the limitation of the body, and therefore its covering or its containment. You could say about control, and that the upper piece is about freedom or extension or the limbs being free. And with Exposure, what I was trying to do is talk about space, time and distance. So there's a polder, there's a dike that runs from Friesland down to Lelystad. And the end of the dike that ends in a dead end is about 1.5 kilometers long, and 1 kilometer out from a roundabout I put this work that is 32 meters high, but is principally seen from the promenade in front of the Lelystad town. So you see it from about 1 kilometer away, and you see it as a small thing in relation to the horizon. So it was a site that I was very interested in for the same reason that I was interested in Crosby Beach and the Buttonmere in Cuxhaven. And I think what I was aware of was that most of Holland is below sea level, that in some senses the relationship of human life there to the environment, well, you can forget it very easily, but once you go to the place of the polders and you see the pumping stations and you recognize in a way how dependent all of those built structures are on sea level. And in a time of rising sea level, in a time of obviously uncertainty, I just wanted to make a work that is very present if you bother to make the journey, and you have to walk, or you can go by car to the roundabout at the end, and then you can walk out towards this, and you can stand, as it were. The Dutch call it the shitting man, but I think of him as a sitting man. But you can stand underneath his bottom, and he's still well away from your potential to touch or interfere with him, as it were. But the great thing is, for me, this is about space, time, and also materiality and dematerialization. So the work is in the constant context of sea mist, of changing light levels. It's never spotlit. And I think kind of has to do with trying to make in one object some response to the dwelling in the Low Countries of a land that has been stolen from the sea. Anyway, next time any of you are in Amsterdam, it's about half-hour train ride to the west. And
Do you like it?
I'm very proud of it.
Well, the second part of my question was, does a thing as too much exposure exist? As you say, the Dutch might think of it as too exposed, and where does this element of exposure come into play? But you've beautifully put it, and I do like it, to be honest. So.
Oh, good. Okay. Well,
I'll do the
that'll
maths.
do. That.
Now, I'm going to bring the microphone down here to the front, because there's someone who's had their hand up for quite a while. Please. Oh, well done. Thank you.
Oh, nice footwork there.
Dancing, actually. Good.
First of all, as a Oxford resident, I want to tell you that I never, ever cross the Broad without looking up.
Oh, good.
And I love when I catch that statue at night, particularly. And it gives me great pleasure. So I wanted to thank you for that. My question is, you said that you used yourself as the model because you can feel it. By the very nature of who you are, it is a male form. And I just wanted to know what your relationship to the female of the world is in terms of...
I'm waiting for the female in a way. You know, I didn't have any choice about what sex I was made, and I think I'm just dealing with what I've got. And the fact is, the sexuality of the work is much less important than I think its relationship with time and therefore with mortality. And I would hope that, in distinction to most male statues, these are not trying to be heroic or, in a sense, well, in any way, military or dominant. And I think that the work demands empathy, and I'm hoping that actually the sexuality is irrelevant in that respect. But you tell me if it isn't, and I don't know what to do about it.
Can we take the microphone over here to my friend on the... Yes, please, here. There we are.
I wonder whether there's anything that you can say about the what appears from the outside to be a kind of extreme commercialization of contemporary art at the moment. You mentioned Damien and Tracy and Sarah Lucas. Their works and the works of other contemporary artists are selling for absolutely phenomenal prices sometimes, which begs the question that it's not always as democratic a process as it claims to be. It seems to me that when you make the kind of work that you're often making in a public place, there's a genuine democracy to it. You know, we all share in it, and there was a very evident democracy in the piece on the fourth plinth. But that's not shared across the contemporary art world in quite the way that it might like to imagine it is. I was standing in Sotheby's when Damien Hirst sold his exhibition there for £111 million, and the amount of the well-oiled Russian oligarchs and their wives walking through the space led me to believe that this wasn't just about art for the people by any means. And I wondered what your reflections on that might be.
Yeah, it's a good question and a necessary one, because I think on the one hand, I'm delighted, honestly, that actually artists are able to work now with a level of confidence and at a scale that demands engagement. But on the other hand, I think it's a very strange. There's a very strange, I think, compact, if you like, between the making of the history of modernity into a recondite, in a way, Gnostic tale, and therefore the products of that being sold by galleries as the products of unique objects, of unique individuals that you are uniquely privileged to buy. And the idea that somehow actually Mondrian's idea and Brancusi's idea was that they were making art that was for everybody, that was absolutely trying. Mondrian wanted to make an art in the same way that I think Monet did, that was immediately inhabitable by the sensibility of anyone. And it's a very strange thing that I think that some of the market forces are, in a sense, mystifying and making a unique story about the identity of works and the privilege of ownership, which runs absolutely contrary, in my view, to the potential of art in our time to be open. And the very fact that so many people now, I think the culture of this country has changed fundamentally. And you could say, the Anglo-Saxon, in a way, attraction to and reliance on the word, I think, has shifted in the last 25 years extraordinarily. And so there is, I think, a real transformation that now, the very fact that everybody in this room, can think about Damien and Tracy as being, in some sense, in knowing that they're British and knowing that they are globally recognised as artists. I think that's we would have known about our local football team, but we wouldn't necessarily have known about our artists, and I think that is a fundamental change, and I think it's for the better. The strange thing is that 20th century art didn't do much for the public realm, you could say. That the whole point, if you think about whether it's Giacometti or Picasso or Mondrian or Brancusi, all of them you think of as being these unique individuals that were uniquely able to give meaning to work that stood outside, as it were, all of the constraints of so-called normal life. But they all reinvented the world on their own terms within their studios. And to many, in many ways, I think then that was compounded by then the rise of the museum and the private gallery. So that then, in a curious way, art never had to make its journey through life. It could go straight from the privileged position of the unique individual to, in a sense, being then contextualized within a museum. And I think that the loss of the responsibility to a wider, I think, idea about art was a real loss. And I mean that's just one of the things that I'm interested in. I just think that I've tried to resist, in a way, the natural thing for my work to be seen in a museum, and tried to say, no, I want it to have a life first. So I want to just put it in the street. I want to put it on a beach. I want to put it on a mountain, and see what happens. See what happens in a sense.
It is interesting. I mean, the business of the Angel of the North, I mean, that's where people first, I think, probably started reckoning with the name of Antony Gormley. I mean, I'm talking about outside of the world of people who are interested in following art and knew your earlier works. But that commission, suddenly, and now, if you go up north and you move amongst the ordinary folks, they own it, they love it, it's theirs, it symbolises their bit of the nation, and they really care about it. And that's
But that was a very unique story in a way. I mean, very unique, both to a time and a place. And it's actually, I mean, I would say that probably a lot of my colleagues would think that work is a step backwards. In other words, it's sort of, it has too many associations with totalitarian, large, monumental sculpture. I resist that because I think it's of a very different order. This is not about supporting some Stalinist 5-year plan or celebrating some, massive military defeat or military success. It's something much more subtle. But it's interesting about the nature. What is the nature of the Angel of the North? The nature of the Angel of the North is that it's a totem. It's a totemic thing. In other words, it's pre-modern. It's fulfilling a function that actually art has forgotten, which is that, because in the commodification and the institutionalization and the commercialization of art, it's become, in a way, mobile objects that are used to decorate those houses of people that can afford
super
it.
Rich, yeah.
And the whole story about the Angel of the North is so fantastically exciting to me because it presents a totally other model, which is, here is a place in which a community has been told they have no future, 27% unemployment, and a socialist Labour council decides that it is going to make a work that says Gateshead is here, Maggie Thatcher may have closed the mines, we may be losing the shipping industry. And in the time that we made that work,
the shipbuilding all went.
Swan Huntington's closed, and two other shipbuilding companies folded. And there was massive. Any kind of large art project it becomes a political football, and there was, the Social Democrats used it as saying, here is a Labour council that's totally lost its marbles basically, and its commitment to its public. It's building, big rusty totalitarian monuments to its own glory in a time when everything's falling apart, and it was quite likely that the thing would fold. But actually, they were totally determined to make that, and the minute it was there, it became this thing. It became a focus for hope, for the regeneration of a sense. We have an identity. This is the kind of thing that we can do. This represents a history of 250 years of coal mining, of almost the same history of shipbuilding. And it's not my work. This was entirely, we wandered about. We put in the back of a white Luton van a model of the work, went around from one engineering firm to another, trying to find all of those people that could bend steel, that could weld, could. And it was in many senses, you could say, well, that's a very pre-modern. It's a kind of tribal thing that we've done there. We've kind of got these people to work together to make this thing for them and for the community, to then declare, put their flag on the map, say, here we are, this is what we can do, this is we believe, even if you don't believe in our future, we do. And it was a magnet, absolute magnet, and it's an extraordinary thing that then following that, lots of other things happened, the Claw Centre, the Millennium Bridge, all of that. and then the Baltic. But I would never argue for art as a pump for regeneration. I'm just saying this was a unique moment. We were very lucky to get a lottery grant. We were very lucky to get a European Regional Development Fund grant. And the help of everybody in the university. You know, we had Newcastle University Engineering Department, the surveying geomatics department doing topographical surveys. We had Sunderland doing. Well, they were amazing. They just started their virtual reality department, and they modelled all of the movement of cars and how visible it would be from here. Anyway, it was a wonderful coming together, and you could say that's the absolute opposite of the idea of Brancusi, you know, alone in his studio, making these highly polished individual things, and it's a. You could say, well, I betrayed that idea of the artist in a way, not. I mean, being uncompromising in his insistence on making his own vision in his own space, in his own time. But I believe that model, I mean, I consistently, you know, it's one of the things that I get most excited about. It's the same with Horizon Field Hamburg, that big, you know, floating platform. I mean, that cost more than the Angel, and it was for a show that lasted 2.5 months. But again, that was an extraordinary collaboration between engineers, local craftsmen, you know, getting that paint, those 6.5 tons, to be a reflective black surface. It was a really exciting collective effort, and I think I tried to play the one. On the one hand, I do commercial shows in individual galleries, and I've got 2 that are on at the moment, one in Hong Kong and one in Salzburg.
I was in Beijing when you opened one.
Yeah.
That was fantastic.
But anyway, I mean, they for me, they provide the opportunity, they provide a very necessary funding stream to do the more experimental stuff.
Well, listen, hands are going up. But we're running out of time, and this man's got to get back up to London. I'm going to take one last question there from my friend in the middle. In the black T-shirt. With the white lettering, I don't know what it says.
It says Biennale.
It says what?
Biennale, but it's
Biennale
Biennale.
of what? Which Biennale? There's
the
so
Venice
many.
one that just passed. Yeah,
Ah.
it's very good.
Okay.
Thank you for your talk. It was very interesting. I just wanted to return to your discussion of the Beholder's Share by Gombrich. Elsewhere, he says that there's this grey area on a work of art whereby the beholder themselves come with their own expectation to reconcile the interpretation of the work of art. And where you were talking about the, you know, using yourself as the medium and how it would be different for, you know, a female viewer, I just wanted to see or hear what you thought about how you can divide this element of a hierarchy in, you know, a patriarchal society when the expectation of perhaps a female viewer when seeing a male body, given the corpus of male bodies throughout the history of art, might then interpret all of these very monolithic male figures that seem to be very overpowering, irrespective of the concept that you imbued it with, when the beholder is equally as important in the interpretation.
Interesting.
Well, I mean, that's a continuation, I think, of your question. I think the you could, like, change that into what is the relationship between the particular and the specific and the universal. And I would say the truth claim of the work is that these are not arbitrary abstractions. They're indexical. They are forensic in Helena's world. This is evidence of a lived moment of human time that has been transferred from flesh to a mineral aggregate. What I would say is that we all live in the subjective collective, and that my attempt to bridge, and I think I think that this gender issue is, I think, secondary to, well, the primary challenge, which is, you could say that all artists are interested in universalizing the particularity of their experience, and that our ability to engage with something, I think, depends on a trust that this thing comes from somewhere true. And I can't do anything about the. I think on one level, it's an accident of history that the truth, that the vehicle, the vessel in which my consciousness happens to arise, has a penis. It's not. That wasn't a prerequisite, and you characterize the work as dominant and massive. I would say that I would counter that by saying, no, this is provisional, it's vulnerable, and it's uncertain. In other words, it's not dominant. The degree to which the work puts into tension the materiality of an object and the fugitive nature of thought and feeling is the degree to which it is successful, in my view. And you may feel that it is not successful, but that's your privilege, and I would, I would accept if you, I don't think, I'm not making an argument that the work is, of supreme importance or significance, and I'm still trying to work it out. I think that every work that I make, in some senses, is me trying to ask the next question that the work has asked of me.
Well, that is a thought to take away with you. I just thought tonight was really a most wonderful, wonderful experience. And I hope you'll join with me in saying to Antony Gormley, thank you, and showing your appreciation.
Thank you.
Wonderful. I want you all to know that Antony Gormley has extended his loan of that wonderful sculpture out there, and it's going to stay with us for another 5 years.
Thank you for listening. Thank you. Lovely audience.
Lovely.